Welcome, team, to today's In the Funnel podcast. And we've just got a fantastic show for you today. And we're keeping along the themes of sales management today. So as many of you know, we've been focused on sales management for the last couple of podcasts. And the reason I'm so excited today, I'm going to introduce him in a moment, but we've got Jason Jordan joining us for today's episode. And Jason's a sales management expert. He's focused on developing sales leadership effectiveness in large B2B sales forces, more recently mid-size B2B sales forces. He was actually previously the co-founder of Vantage Point Performance, very, very well-known leading sales management training company. And he's actually the best-selling author of a number of books. So many of you have heard me praise this book. Cracking the Sales Management Code. And you can take a look. I'm rough on books. I highlight, I take notes. This is the type of book that has to stay, as a sales leader, it's got to stay on your local bookshelf. And you've absolutely got to be going back to this book. We'll talk lots with Jason about this. The next book that I came across was called Crushing Quota. And what I loved about this, it really focused in on the importance of sales coaching, which we absolutely believe is one of the X factors of sales management. And admittedly, I'm just starting and enjoying this book, Sales Insanity. And the fun part, it's been selected as a top sales book by Top Sales Magazine. But what's fun about this one, it's actually articulating things we shouldn't be doing, talking about disasters in professional sales. So we'll talk a little bit more later on with Jason about that. Today, Jason teaches sales manager at the University of Virginia's Darden School of Business. But he really is one of the global thought leaders in the space we're going to get into here today. So let's all welcome Jason Jordan to the show today.
Hello.
Hey, Jason, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for the glorious introduction.
Well, you know, my team was chiding me before this because they know I'm a little bit of a fanboy. So, they were excited to see me be nervous interviewing you. How are things at Biz School at Darden these days?
Things are great. You know, not totally back to normal, but almost there. And everyone's excited about getting back in the classroom and having face-to-face interactions.
Yeah, I can imagine it. We're based in Toronto. And so it's only recently that we've been doing face-to-face meetings again. And boy, what a joy to get in front of people again. It's just been fantastic.
Yeah, it's literally like being let out of prison, you know.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So maybe to start, Jason, tell us a little bit about your journey in professional sales. You've had really an amazing career, but tell us a little bit about that journey.
Thank you. Sure. So my father was in sales. So to me, it wasn't a foreign idea. He actually sold newspaper advertisements for the local newspaper. And so growing up, you know, I was kind of around it. And then when I graduated from college, I went straight into sales, 100% commission, like hardcore. Here's a phone book. Here's a phone book, you know, kind of sales. And did that for a few years, which was interesting. You know, I had years where I made more money than, were there months that I made more money than I ever thought I would make, and then I had months where I made $800, and it was a lesson in how not to budget your money. And so then went to business school here at the University of Virginia, which is how I kind of discovered and built an affiliation with the university. And then it's funny, when I graduated from business school in '97, and you know, the dot-com boom hadn't happened, so the entrepreneurship bug wasn't in the air like it has been since then. And so, you know, when I was graduating, you either went into banking or consulting. Those were your two choices. So I went into management consulting, and being the only management consultant in sight who had any sales experience, anytime there was a sales consulting engagement, it was like, get Jason Jordan. So I spent, I guess, a decade or so doing consulting. So I'd done pretty much every kind of sales improvement project, I guess you would say, that there is, from redesigning processes and implementing CRM and territory design and incentive compensation and just all of it, right? So over the course, and then to enter the part of my career that you were referencing, you know, it just became apparent to me when I'm going through my consulting career that the frontline sales managers were so important, and the second line as well. And then because I would, you know, we'd implement a new sales process or whatever it was, And I go back 6 or 9 months later and talk to the VP of sales. We didn't have chief sales officers or CROs then, but we talked to the head of sales and we say, how'd it go? And they'd always had the same response. They'd say, well, it went pretty well over here, and over here, not so well. I was like, okay, well, so what was the difference? And it was always, well, over here, the leadership team really, kind of bought into it and made it a priority. And over here, there was just other stuff going on. And it just became so apparent that the frontline sales managers were either kind of deflecting the change and protecting the team from the organization, which is what some people think their role is. In other places, they were pushing the go-to-market strategy down to the field. And it was a eye-opening, realization, as simple as it is and as obvious as it seems when you say it out loud. And so then started doing a bunch of research into sales management, sales metrics, which led to kind of an understanding of sales processes a little better than I had before. And so wrote the book. And for a decade, I had two great partners, Phil and Michelle, who still have the company Vantage Point, and we trained and developed sales leadership teams for GE and 3M and Schlumberger and Aon, big companies. And then left there at the end of 2018 for something new. And as I mentioned to you, before, I've been working with, not by design, but pretty exclusively with private equity companies over the last almost 3 years, and doing consulting projects. But as more interestingly, for the fourth time, I'm in an interim executive role, an interim chief revenue officer, while I put some things in place in the smaller company, and then we'll hire someone to replace me. And that's been, again, another kind of career perspective that I didn't have, of actually sitting in the seat, and managing people and having to create the reports and use them. So it's been really challenging in a very good way. And so here I am. And
then you've also started to sweat at the end of a quarter now.
So. Yeah. Well, the only advantage I have is I know I'm getting fired. I just hope it's on good terms.
So yeah, we do a similar thing, Jason, where we're doing sales enablement consulting, and at times it feels like we're running 2 or 3 sales organizations at a time. But I actually love being in that seat, because I've always felt that to be able to teach or coach anything, you have to be living that life and feeling that pressure and understanding these changes that are taking place. Because one of the things I love about your books, the research. Fact-based, these aren't platitudes about sales management, it's fact-based research. How are we doing overall? I mean, all of us, and we've had lots of guests on the show that talk about what's happening in professional sales. And there seems to be this kind of theme of, we're in some trouble here. Performance declining, productivity declining, portions of the sales force may or may not disappear due to technology. Based on what you're seeing, because you'd certainly be in the category of knowing as much as anybody, how are we doing as a business discipline overall, professional sales?
Wow. So there's about 4 hours worth of content that you just mentioned, measuring salespeople and technology. Let me just start. Let me go in reverse order, because I just happened to be thinking about this as we were waiting to come on air. There's this, when the internet came along, there was this thought that the sales force was going to disappear, right? All the kind of transactional salespeople are going to be replaced by websites. And it's, and that kind of went down for 20 years. And now we're right back there with AI, right? So now AI is going to disrupt the industry and salespeople are going to disappear. So I wrote a couple of blog posts on this along the way. And so I went back and looked at the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the year 2000. And according to them, 10.4% of the American workforce was in sales, a sales-related profession. Okay. And this was in 2012 that I started thinking about it. In 2012, 10.6% of the United States workforce was in sales, right? So more than a decade after the internet was supposed to have dislodged 1/3 of the sales force, the exact same percentage, actually slightly more of our workforce was in sales. And I went back, I don't know, it's been 4 or 5 years at this point, but the numbers are the same, right? So the percentage of our workforce that's been in sales has been steady before the internet, after the internet, and I suspect it'll be the same after AI. And I mean, perhaps I'm wrong, but it's, it's so easy to stand up and say 1/3 of these jobs are going to be gone and scare people. But in reality, what sales has done very well is we've evolved. And, I don't think there are that many transactional salespeople in the way that they were. I mean, sales was forced to up its game. And I think if you look around at the sales profession right now, it is much more of that. It's more of a profession and less of a trade that I think it was perceived for a long time to be. And that's why we see, and I've been a part of this through a foundation called the Sales Education Foundation. We've been trying to promote sales education in universities and colleges. And it's not a trade that you learn as an apprentice and you make your mistakes along the way. I mean, there's a discipline there. This is, the books that and the writing that I've done, I've tried to kind of put guardrails around what this is and how it works and kind of shine a light on the inner workings, because until it becomes a discipline with research and frameworks and, right and wrong, then it will remain a trade-ish like thing where you just muddle your way through. But increasingly we have made progress. So the technology thing is, we'll see what AI does. I mean, obviously it's like the internet has supported the sales team, right? I think salespeople have more insight into their customers and prospects than ever before. Now, prospects have more insight into customers and products, which is what everyone says that will eliminate the need for a salesperson. Right. But, the technology comes both sides, right? So, I mean, salespeople are using AI to up their game, right? To target better customers and get better inbound leads and to know more about the conversation and be smarter about what they say. And managers are using it to coach. So it's reinforcing the sales force, not eliminating it, in my perspective. But the opening question you had was about the performance of the sales teams and the perception that we're continually making fewer of us are making quota. And I find this a little bit comical. So as I mentioned, I've done a lot of incentive compensation design and all that stuff through the years. And it was always said that, a good compensation design, well, let me speak more specifically about quotas, that the quotas were set right when 2/3 to 3/4 of the sales team were expected to accomplish it, right? So 100% of the salespeople are not expected to make quota. And in fact, if I'm a CEO and I see that 100% of my salespeople made quota, I'm probably firing the chief revenue officer because not, right? Like not pushing them hard enough, just not aggressive enough, not growing fast enough. How can everyone possibly succeed? So, when people say 50% of salespeople are making their, 55% of salespeople are reaching their quota, it's against a bar of 66 or against a bar of 70. So, to say that half salespeople are failing is not 100% genuine. I don't think many people believe it that way. I mean, we want all of our salespeople to get to quota. Obviously, we want everyone to succeed and make a bunch of money. We want to be able to, succeed ourselves as sales leaders and hit our bonuses and the whole thing. But in reality, some salespeople are going to fail, and hopefully they don't fail miserably and exit the organization. But if they're at 80% or 90% of their quota, probably doing okay and contributing to the organization. So I think that the bar is a weird thing. We talk about sales, right? I mean, in fact, I'll give you this one story and then I'll pause and stop my monologue. But
hey, this is why you're here. Don't worry about the monologue. This is great.
But the source of cracking the sales management code was a conversation that I had in Manhattan in like 2000. And actually, believe it or not, I still have the notes from that day because I realized I was cleaning out my stuff one day. I was like, this is the meeting so it was, I don't know, 2007, I think. And I was in a meeting with some mid-level sales folks at American Express's headquarters in Manhattan. And I forget even the topic, we were trying to sell them consulting or something, whatever it was.
Sure.
And so we're having a break and getting coffee and, snacks or whatever. And I was talking to this guy. And he said, I was in a room last week with the global head of sales for American Express. And let's assume he was with 500 people in the room. But anyways, sales enablement guy, but we didn't have that title at the time, right? It was just a sales ops person or whatever, if we even had that title. And he said that the head of sales posed a pretty interesting question. He said, how do I know if my sales force is any good? He said, is it because they hit their quota? Well, I can make them succeed or fail by that measure tomorrow with an email. If my sales are growing faster in Europe than in North America, does that mean my European sales force is better? Well, I don't know. Who are the competitors? What's the regulatory environment? What's the economy doing? He said, when you get down to it, like, how do I really know if my sales force is any good? And it just started needling at me and annoying me. And all those moments when you're by yourself and everything's quiet, you're in the car, you're riding your lawn tractor, you're in the shower, whatever, these questions. And that's why I started collecting sales management reports, because I figured that, if a company's taking the time to collect this data and report it, that must be what they think is good, right? That's their measure of good. And, I thought it would be a kind of a best practices exercise where we collect some reports and the best practices would kind of tumble out of it. Like, here's how we're organizing it. And it was just chaos. Like every sales report, and I'm talking about sales reports from IBM and Ernst & Young and GE,
big companies where you think it would be disciplined and, process driven, disciplined and methodical.
Yeah, and they would have organized the data in a meaningful way to enable better management. And it was just a bunch of flat reports, right? And so, this question of how do you know if your sales force is any good? Is it really successful? Are you achieving as much as you possibly can? It's a mystery, and it's easy to cast shade on a sales team because only 54% of them are making quota, but maybe not. I don't know.
By the way, that's the first time in all of these I've ever heard somebody capture it that way, because I think negativity sometimes sells. So we see it in the news, we see it everywhere. So this idea that, wow, 1 in 2 salespeople miss quota, whereas no other business discipline would 1 in 2 people be missing the minimum expectation. But you bring up such a great point, Jason. It's not the minimum expectation. The expectation is only maybe 2/3 of the team would hit quota for the sales leader in the company to actually hit their goal. Mm-hmm. So it's more, the answer to the question is how many of the companies are hitting their goal. That's really the answer in terms of sales performance, not the individual salespeople.
And sales is also the only part of the organization, I think, where the goals are continually increasing, right? I mean, if you're a manufacturer, you have a target, like 95% productivity through the manufacturing facility, and that's it. Like, you're not going to get to 110. But we look at sales and we're like, we want 110.
Right.
Yeah. So it's sales is its own thing, and it comes with blessings and warts.
Sure, it is. So let's move over to sales management. So an area of focus, and so when we look at the same thing for sales leaders today, that research is out there. I'm sure you've even participated as a thought leader, giving your insight. But most of us are seeing these data points from Gartner, from other places, CSO Insights. Hey, the tenure of a CRO is less than 2 years. And you and I are both getting pulled into companies probably right now where we're in there because a CRO has been moved on and they want a clean set of eyes to build a playbook for the business. How about sales management specifically, outside of the sales team? What are you seeing in terms of the turnover, the transition, how that sort of level is performing?
Well, I don't think there's been a huge change in this. The reality is, I wish there was some data from way back when, I can't remember, but someone had done a survey. This must have been 2010 or before. I doubt it's changed much, but there was a survey of kind of the career paths of CEOs in Fortune 500 companies. And at the time, only 2 or 3 had spent more than 6 months in sales. And I think that has changed. I mean, SAP had a very sales focused leader for a while. Others have come up through. I think to an extent it's changing, but in reality, let's be honest, the CEO and the CFO, like, they don't understand sales. They don't understand it. And, when something's a black box, you look at the output and you're like, this box isn't putting out enough stuff, throw it away and get a new box. Mm-hmm. And so I think, I always say that, I wouldn't fire a sales leader who's not hitting his or her number as long as they know why. Right. I mean, if a sales leader came into my office after 2 years and said, and this is like, sports coaches, pick it, if someone comes into my office after 2 years and says, look, we're upgrading the sales team, we've made a lot of progress, here are the problems I see, here are the things we're doing to make it right, then I'd go, okay, then we're headed in the direction, you're my guy, right? But if someone came in and said, my sales team sucks and it's not my fault, and just give me another try, coach, then you're going to lose your job. And so I think that part of it is just this black box kind of insight of or vision of the sales team. And also, sales presents itself as a little transactional in the way that we plug in and out salespeople. We fire people quickly, we hire people quickly. Turnover is enormous, no matter just the nature of the job. Turnover is the highest as any part of the organization, higher than any part of the organization. So I think it's just a cultural thing, and I don't know that some people surely get, some people deserve to be fired after 6 months. Some probably don't deserve to be fired after 2.4 years or whatever it is. But, I think sales is evolving and in a positive way. I think that sales is more understood. I think it's more appreciated, though any head of sales who's ever had a battle with the CFO over compensation, it's just, some people are never going to get it. Mm-hmm. But it's, we're making headway. I think it's just a misunderstood profession, but getting there. Sales, sales was the last discipline to really get discipline. Right? Operations got all of its re-engineering and well, probably the first was finance, right? They got GAAP and all these guidelines for how do you count things, right? And then operations had process improvement and all this stuff. And then eventually marketing got called to the table, right, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And then sales, when CRM came along in the late 1990s, early 2000s, Anderson Consulting showed up ready to automate sales, and they looked around and like, well, show us your processes. We're going to automate them just like we did in finance and operations. And sales was like, process.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. I've got a bunch of rock stars. We don't need a stinking process,
Well, intuitive. Yeah. We didn't
yeah.
we were prepared for any meeting in our entire lives. It's just, we just do it off the cuff. We can ad lib anything.
Yeah. And cynically, if CRM hadn't come along, sales would still be in the dark ages. I mean, it really shed a light on the fact that there wasn't discipline. And, you could have gotten kicked out of a VP of sales office in 1980 for saying the word process. When you want to kill a Christmas party, start talking about the process you're going to implement in the coming year. And, now it's just a part of it. Now it's a part of our vernacular and the conversation. And, I think cracking the sales management code laid out some discipline to process that, people knew intuitively, but didn't really use explicitly. And, I think we're getting there. And, it's just maybe not in our lifetime, but eventually.
By the way, I think it definitely, cracking the sales management code absolutely lays it out. Like, it lays out that game plan. I also love the way it positions. It talks about the challenge of we always call it, we're Canadian, right? So every reference is Canadian, is hockey, the Wayne Gretzky problem. I love you've used a couple of great examples in here of the great player who gets promoted into sales management and is immediately miserable. I was that person in the year 2000 and was just an awful sales manager and immediately made my whole team miserable. I was miserable. The whole team was miserable. And because I was part of a big company, you're performing badly, but you keep getting promoted. It was only once I started getting promoted to run divisions of businesses I knew nothing about. That's when I started to have the epiphany about being a better sales leader, because I started coaching people and giving them the credit and letting them, just enabling them instead of telling people what to do. Combination of all those things, the coaching habit and multipliers with Liz Wiseman and all those thoughts. But just circling back now to sales management today, Jason, this is your core area of expertise. We have a lot of people who will hear this and they will be that sales manager, particularly, I guess, at this time of year, a sales leader thinking, however the year ended, there's some sort of expectation if they're on a calendar year that they're going to recalibrate. Okay, what's the game plan for next year? How do we elevate performance? My goals are going to go up, no matter what. So what am I going to do to get there? If we've got somebody listening today who's having a tougher time on sales management, where would you suggest they start? So what are the things as a sales leader we need to think about doing?
So I always feel like I'm disappointing in answering a question like this. There's so much energy and excitement for all the innovations in sales, right? So AI and, all the apps and the text, the sales stack, right? We talk about the sales stack. What's your sales stack?
Yeah.
And, I think that's all great, but technology is a tool to support the process. Technology is not the strategy. And, when I step into these roles or when I talk to people, I think it's just blocking and tackling. It's nice to have the bells and whistles, but, whether it's 1901 or 1890 with John Henry Patterson, right, at National Cash Register Company putting processes in place, or whether it's 1980 or whether it's 2080. I think the fundamental problems in most sales forces are blocking and tackling. The processes aren't defined, the measures aren't correct, or the measures aren't the most meaningful measures. The incentive plans are designed kooky, and management's not doing what it should be doing, which is managing and enabling and getting out of the way. And, I think it's just blocking and tackling, unless you get to the scale of, a GE and maybe GE is not the best example anymore, but, a 3M or some of the companies that we worked with. Those companies have really sophisticated sales support, right? They have sales enablement teams and sales operations teams and CROs, where it used to be siloed into, marketing and sales. I mean, when you get to that scale, they're playing at a pretty high level of skill. But most companies, take the Fortune 2000 down, probably just need to focus on the knitting, and so I would say really think through the sales roles. Well, here's how I think about this. Everything starts with the buyer. Right, so think about your buyers, think about their buying process. And when I teach a course at Darden at the University of Virginia, the first class is an introductory class. The second class is on buying. So I start out my class in selling with a class in buying. And,
right.
So first start with the buyers. Like really think through, how are they buying? Why are they buying? Do they see us as differentiated? So you start with the buyer. In fact, I had a client one time, probably 20 years ago at this point, Brett, who's the best down in Dallas. And he said, I don't even teach my salespeople how to sell. He said, I teach them how our customers buy. And if they understand the customer and how they buy and why they buy, they're smart enough to figure out the selling part. And so I think that's, the first thing you could do in 2022 is sit down and just map out the buying process. Maybe even talk to some of your customers, have them have a little workshop with your customers and understand where are the segments and how they buy differently and who's transactional and who needs consultative selling. And then start with the sales process, right? Does my sales process mirror that? Do the metrics and milestones in the process mirror the metrics and milestones in the buying process? I mean, every milestone in the sales process should mirror increasing commitment from the buyer, right? But they don't. Like, we're like, oh, we identified a lead. Okay, well, the buyer is no more prone to buy from you now that you've identified them, and then we get to doing a demo. Well, the buyer may or may not be more motivated after your demo, but we up the percentage of our forecast because the demo is completed. Yeah. And then we go to proposal, right? We submit a proposal. Our win rate goes to 70%, which is laughable because no one wins 70%. And then, you sending a proposal to a customer, does that really make them 70% likely to buy instead of 40% likely? I mean, yeah, sure, I'll take your proposal. I'll take 10 proposals. It's not. So I think the buying process is a mess. And then once you figure out the buying process and the selling process, then you start thinking about how you staff that process, right? Does one person need to own this from end to end, or can I have a business development rep doing the lead gen and handing it, and I think that, and then the training and all the stuff that comes from there. But basically, build back from the buyer, and you'll probably see some places that you're missing stuff. And I will say that, again, not that you asked, but I'll end my monologue with this. We get so focused on the innovation being technology, right? And that's happened since 1998 when Siebel started. Tom Siebel started Siebel Systems. We've seen technology as the innovation. I think the innovation in the past decade has been process and role, and it's been driven largely by SaaS companies. And there's some natural things that have happened. There's some things about the nature of a SaaS product or service that enable you to break the process into pieces. But I think the real innovation has been with process and role. Right, we didn't have business development reps, BDRs or SDRs. We didn't have those, right? And now people see this as not inside sales. Used to be you just were inside selling. Now inside sales is lead generation, lead qualification. We didn't have things like MQLs and SQLs and SALs. Like, this wasn't a vernacular, and it's a process innovation. It's not technology. And we didn't have customer success managers, right? We had account managers or key account managers. We didn't have this idea of someone helping onboard and enable the use of the product. And I think this has been the innovation in sales in the past decade. It's been process and role. And, technology has enabled that with the flow of information and the ability to kind of cobble together different roles in a single sales cycle. But it's, AI is cool. I get it. I've seen some really neat products. I probably should be using more of them in my work, but I think the real innovation is process and role. And I think it's been game changing for the experience of the buyer and the customer.
Well, Jason, I think your comment about the blocking and tackling, I don't think that's ever going to change. So when you say, hey, what's really important about what do you need to be able to be good at? That part hasn't changed in 100 years. We're still people. We still have to have we have to communicate. We have to be able to add value in a conversation and understand the better future that particular buyer wants. And they're only going to tell us or engage us if we can add some form of value. And that's actually where I think that's the dark side of technology, in my view. You and I both work with a lot of SaaS companies that have lots of inside teams. I think the way those companies grow so quickly, onboarding so many inside salespeople, I think the salespeople end up defaulting to leveraging technology, but they actually don't want a live conversation. Or they don't have the capability of that live conversation. And technology can certainly help at the top of the funnel, no question, great stuff. But at some point in time, I have to be compelling and be able to articulate value to the person I'm speaking to, totally align with the buyer's journey. I need to understand their world and earn the right to proceed. Whatever that process is, I've got to earn the right to get to the next level. And technology can't do all of that for us. And I think it confuses us. And by the way, you saw it too, in the early 2000s, Salesforce automation technology killed sales management because they started counting from their office instead of getting out in the field and coaching somebody.
Yeah, and looking at reports, it gives you this false sense of control. It's like comfort food to some sales leaders, and the attention is just wrong. The energy is just wrong. As you were talking and as I was talking, I was thinking about, and I don't like to use sports analogies because they fall flat on half the people listening. But I was watching a college football game last weekend, I think it was, and I was like, I played football in high school, and like I don't recognize the game. Like it's a different game. Mm-hmm. Like the quarterback is no longer under center. This run pass option, there was never an option. You had a pass play or a run play. And now we have a single play that's pass or run, like an option. I mean, and it's a totally different game. The offense is more sophisticated. The defense is more sophisticated, but you lose yardage if you don't block.
Right.
And you give up touchdowns if you don't tackle. Right. So it's like everything around it is more sophisticated. The microphones or speakers in your helmets, and you're talking to the sideline. There's technology. Process is more complex. The roles are more complex, but fundamentally you succeed or you fail if you do your most fundamental job, like block, tackle, pass, catch, don't fumble the ball. It's just, all the same. It's a different game, but it's the same keys to success. And I think that's, I could run basketball analogies, and if I understood anything about hockey, I could probably do hockey analogies. I think that it's just more sophisticated, and that's going to continue to happen. Sales is going to become more sophisticated with more roles and more technology and more chopped up processes. But it comes down to conversations. I tell the class, I really have enjoyed teaching sales to people who know nothing about sales. It's really forced me to kind of think it through at very fundamental levels, right? I mean, like even the language you use, you can't be sloppy with it because, when you say a word they haven't heard, they're trying to, that's a word to them. That's a new word, right? And they're going to think about that. So if you come behind that with a different version of the same word, it's really kind of forced in a way that, you get with children, where you have to really be very deliberate about how you're communicating. And I tell them, I say, look, sales is all about buying, and the buyer's got a process. They've got a journey, and your job is just to hold their hand and make sure that at every step of the journey, you're feeding them the information that they need. You're putting in their ear the information you want them to have. And then if you do that successfully, you hold their hand to go to the next step of the buying process. And the same thing, it's like communicating, understanding what they're needing, giving it to them, understanding what you want them to believe, giving them that. And then if you succeed, you go to the next step. And if you do that all the way, you succeed in a sale, right? This isn't anything magical. We just have to pay attention.
Not magical, but super hard.
Oh yeah. Not to minimize it at all.
I think that's where I love the analogy there, but it's super tough. It's like running a marathon. It's not hard. The bell goes, just follow the woman in front of you and she'll lead you. But boy, it doesn't feel that great after about the 14th mile.
Yeah. A lot of preparation goes into it.
A lot. Thank you. A lot of preparation. When you were mentioning, when you're talking about, hey, I like teaching because I've got to go back to the basics. It was in Crushing Quota, and I know it's a long time ago for you, but I love this analogy. I forget the term you used, but it was actually articulating the problem of knowledge, when you're coaching somebody, because you can't even remember what it was like not to know this. So when you explain something, you're assuming there's other levels of understanding that just don't exist. And I think
the curse of knowledge, and
curse of knowledge.
And Michelle actually wrote most of that book, so I give credit to her. But I fall into this trap all the time. Like if I know something, I assume other people know it as well. Yeah. And it's it's like some people say, I didn't really learn that much in college. I was an economics major, almost a philosophy double major, if you can imagine those two things at the same time. Yeah.
And then you went right into commission-based sales. Wow.
Yeah. Can you imagine? And so, it's funny you say you didn't learn much in college or didn't learn much in school, but it's just because you know it intuitively. like supply and demand is something that I understand at an intuitive level because I studied it for 4 years, and so when I see things, it seems kind of obvious to me, and you don't point it out, right? And some people, it's hard for me to understand that people can go through life without understanding economics. But then, the sociology majors probably look at me fumbling around my social life and personal life, and like, how can anyone not understand the basic tenets that this guy is stomping all over? So, it's but we take things for granted, and that's why I say teaching people who don't know sales has been a pretty big challenge. I mean, it'd be like taking people out of college and their first sales job, which I never had, to develop totally fresh people, right? I focused on developing sales managers, right? They've been in sales for years. They understand the words to use and how it works. It's really just kind of putting a new face on sales for them, but it's just blocking and tackling. And I don't think it's appreciated enough.
Different challenge for you when you're trying to change a mature person than somebody right out of school. It's that there's a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. In some cases, it's just a change management issue with the more mature person if they're not open to change. I went to Canadian University twice, Jason. So, that intuitive knowledge, the only thing you get from what I got out of Canadian University, I'm amazed that not everybody can drink a beer in less than 3 seconds.
I might be able to set that benchmark, or at least I could at one point.
That's right. Yeah, that's really what I gleaned in terms of a core skills there. So with those classes today, I think it's interesting. One of the great points that have been brought up in your writing is sales as a profession. Mm-hmm. Formal training, certification, ongoing management. How has it changed today? You teach a course as part of the MBA program at Darden. I did an MBA program, 3 marketing courses, 4 finance courses, 0 courses on professional sales, but that was a long time ago. It's 15 years ago, maybe more. How is it today in the university system in the US? What percentage or are lots more schools teaching professional sales as part of the MBA curriculum?
Not a lot of as the MBA. So I'll tell you a story of how this came about. And the academic conversation may be boring to some, but this is more about the profession. So I moved back to Charlottesville, Virginia, where the University of Virginia is located, in 2007. When I moved back, I was just kind of I'm a networker. I believe in networking. And if you know good people, good things happen. And so was just sitting down with the head of marketing, and I actually wanted to introduce him to Neil Rackham. Was the reason I was kind of having a conversation with him. And so anyway, I put my face in front of Robert Speckman, the guy, and who's now retired. But anyway, about a month later, he sent me an email, and the situation was 70 students. So there are 330 in a graduating class. So 70 of those 330 had put their names in a spreadsheet saying that if a course in sales were offered, they would sign up for it if their schedule permitted. So basically, students requested a course in sales, not sales management, which Robert was a little bummed out. He's like, this is not a management course. This doesn't belong in school, right? They want to know how to sell, because they were smart enough to know that if they're a consultant or a banker or an entrepreneur, at some point in their career, entrepreneurs early, bankers and consultants later, like sales is it, right? I mean, you basically have a quota if you're a partner in a consulting firm.
Right.
And being technically proficient will get you halfway through your career, and then that's where you stop if you can't sell. So anyway, it's interesting that the students requested it, and and he asked me if I knew anyone that could teach it, and I thought it was like being asked to coach the Olympic team. I'm like, I'll make time. I can find a way to do this. Right? And so when we started the Sales Education Foundation, which has been maybe almost 15 years ago at this point, there are 4,000 colleges and universities in the United States. There were about 40 that had some kind of program. Lots had classes, but not, which were in the marketing department typically, or entrepreneurship department.
Yeah.
But there were only around 40 that had a certificate or a major or a minor, some kind of structured program. Now it's over 150, which is still woeful, because you think about the number of people that graduate with marketing degrees versus the number that graduate with sales degrees, and there are probably 20 times more sales jobs than marketing jobs, if not 100 times more. The university is a little misaligned in that way, and it's because, in 1980, if you wanted to teach sales and what did you teach? Right. There wasn't spin selling. There wasn't Miller Hyman. There wasn't that discipline. And even more, to become a professor of sales, which very few exist, you have to do research and publish in sales, right? That's the key to becoming a professor, to teach. This is a vicious cycle that you have to get, or virtuous, depending on how you look at it, where you've got to get in the cycle, right? You got to have publishing in sales to become professor of sales, to teach sales, to publish and read. And so it's just been a hard nut to crack. But we actually, interestingly, this might be interesting to folks. The Sales Education Foundation annually publishes, well, they call it the annual, and it has all the schools that we know of in the world, not in the United States, but in the world, that have a sales program. And I can tell you that the companies that have discovered this and recruit from these schools love hiring salespeople. They ramp up. The statistics that we have is that they ramp up 50% faster than another sales hire.
Wow.
And turnover is 30% lower, because they've typically had an internship in sales, or they know what they're getting into, right? It's not like someone who is attracted to the compensation, goes into sales like, this sucks, I don't want to do this anymore. So, I mean, companies pay big money to have exclusive access to these graduates. So if you do hire folks right out of college, or even folks 1 or 2 years out of college in sales, these people would be equivalent with hiring someone 1 or 2 years out of college in sales. University Sales Education, the Sales Education Foundation, check it out.
Sales Education Foundation. And is that the website, Jason?
You'll find, I think it's salesfoundation.org. I'm embarrassed to say I don't know since I'm on the board, but Sales Education Foundation.
We'll find it. And we'll find it. And folks, anybody listening to this podcast, go to info@inthefunnel.com. If you want to get the link to the Sales Education Foundation, we'll send it over to you. What a great resource, by the way. That'd be fit. Yeah. By the way, these days, everything still can be remote. So anybody anywhere can be pulling folks from these schools, and they can be selling remote. At least,
yeah, it's an untapped resource. A lot of companies, I mean, I could name the companies, but as I said, they pay big money to these schools to get first access to the recruits. It's if you have junior salespeople, you should know.
And that original, by the way, that original class, you said, hey, they said 70 students have asked for a course on professional selling at the University of Virginia today. How interested are the students in professional selling now? So it's been a few years you've been doing this, and do you still have a robust group every year that wants to be a part of it?
So the maximum for a class is 65 students. And this past year, this most recent, I had 66. Because someone begged basically to get into the class, and I was like, wonderful. 65, 66, whatever. It's not material to me. So we actually, it's an oversubscribed course, which is great to think that people are so interested in. And in the beginning, there weren't people in the class who had sales typically, but this last time I had probably 10 folks who had been in sales. And so it's, I was one of the few people in the business school who had sales experience. It just wasn't the hiring ground, so to speak, for university. For MBAs, and now it is, and we have companies like Microsoft recruit for salespeople at Darden. Like, they come looking for salespeople from MBA programs because they need to have that executive level conversation, and it's a training ground for it. I won't say MBAs step into an executive role and they're perfect executives, but they can have a balance sheet conversation, they can have expense conversation, they can talk about marketing, they can talk about finance. So that's an interesting thing. It's fun thing.
Yeah, high degree of business acumen. Hey, listen, Jason, this has been a huge pleasure. So first of all, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us today. I'm sure everybody listening got enormous value out of the conversation. How do people keep following what you're up to? So if we wanted to get in contact with you or follow what you're up to, how do we do that?
So LinkedIn, probably the best resource to get in touch with anyone, really. Pretty easy to find there. Jason Jordan. Sales.
Yeah.
And if you want to reach out directly, I don't mind. My email is jj@jasonjordan.com. Easy as can be.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, listen, Jason, thank you again. We really, really appreciate you joining us here today. Everything we do is we're just trying to enable, really improve the lives of professional salespeople with strategy, process, tools, things they can apply best practices today. Anybody in the sales organization. And in my view, there's no question people would have got value out of it today, and I certainly did.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks so much for joining. I hope we get a chance to speak again.
Pleasure.
And everybody else listening today, thank you so much for listening. If you got value out of it today, follow and subscribe our podcast, the Selling Well Podcast. If you've got any thoughts in terms of how we can improve this to get more value to you, let us know that as well. You can reach out to me, Mark Cox, at inthefunnel.com, Mark Cox at inthefunnel.com. Thanks, everybody.